Hello Guardians, it is Ebontis, and in this video, they're giving us kind of an update, a brief one. This is not a full, comprehensive patch notes by any stretch, but there are some changes to abilities and some ideas of why that I do want to cover so you can kind of get ready and kind of get mentally prepared for what's changing. Not all bad, but they're definitely kind of changing things in different ways because of how the new systems are going to work, because theoretically, the new systems with our ability cooldowns the way they are and some things set up the way they are probably would make us just a little extra broken than we already are. So they're trying to balance things, and they will revisit if needed. So if something comes out poorly, they'll get back to it. Yesterday, they dropped a bunch of info on Strand. There is a little bit of just visual changes to the Destiny 2 Lightfall page. I'm just going to tuck those at the end if you guys want to see them. Just kind of a way to look at them visually, the icons and stuff like that. Don't have to spend too much time, but so you can see them. I did a full breakdown explanation. Basically, I showed the trailer. I went through the full Strand article, kind of all the words and like definitions of what everything is, and then showed the trailer again, frame by frame, breaking down what all of it was. So if you haven't seen that video, click the link up here. I go through everything for Strand that we have so far. Kind of broke it all down. There's a PC Gamer article with a couple other questions. There's a lot of info in there. So I'm going to try and make today's video a little shorter. So I'm not going to spend too much time on Strand, but stuff in here is good to discuss, and I'm going to probably give you my thoughts as to why, if I agree, or where I'm kind of excited or worried as we go. So the first thing is the road traveled and the path ahead. So they said when Arc 3.0 came out, or with Arc 3.0 with Plunder, they got all the Arc or the 3.0 classes out there. That being said, at this point, we have so many ways between armor, exotic armor, fragments, aspects, mods, perks to be able to get our abilities back. They have a very high uptime, and our abilities are somewhat potent. So what they're trying to do is their goal is to, with ability uptime on both PvE and PvP, is to get back roughly where they were before Witch Queen, basically the 30th anniversary in December of 2021. So they're making some changes to the ability energy economy in Lightfall and subsequent seasons to correct ability uptime. Again, some may go up, some may go down. They said while still rewarding players for investing in build crafting and fine-tuning their Guardian how they want to. So what they state is they rescaled the efficacy of discipline, strength, and then say like Titans for Barricade, it's resilience; for Warlocks, for Rift, it's recovery; Hunters, it's mobility; for your dodge. So basically they rescaled the efficacy of those stats on your grenade, melee, and class ability regeneration rates. In general, the regeneration provided by a tier 10 stat is now roughly equivalent to a tier 8 in the previous system. So if you max out your stat at tier 10, and this is for Lightfall, so if you max out a stat at tier 10, you're roughly going to get the benefit of what a tier 8 stat was previously. Just an example of that, if you want to know, take an arc pulse grenade, for example. Tier 1 is a minute and 59 seconds. Really long time, but nobody probably has grenade energy of 10. On the other side, tier 10 for a pulse grenade is 40 seconds, just without doing anything. No demolitionist, no adrenaline junkie, no mods, nothing. 40 seconds. It's pretty quick. Tier 8 is 52 seconds. Same thing, take a solar firebolt. Normally it's 112 at tier 1. At tier 10 it's 24 seconds. Tier 8 it's 32 seconds. So basically the way I read this is that when you get to tier 10 on a stat, you're going to have a little longer cooldown than you do as of right now when I record this video before Lightfall comes out. So our cooldowns for our base things, just based on your stats alone, your cooldown's going to be a little bit longer. Because tier 8 to tier 10, it's usually not a drastic difference. It's usually somewhere in the realm of like 10 seconds, but it's that final 10 seconds to really make you get it all the time. They also state each stat in the tier is more consistent. So it's more of a linear gain in cooldown reduction rather than spiking heavily at low tiers. So if you get down to like tier 1 or tier 2 or something, you are just like really penalized. If you're below 3, usually it's awful. So now it's going to be a little bit more linear. Hopefully it's just a little more gradual as you build up and you get the right amount of benefit. But we'll have to see what all that is once we get there. Again, the cooldown for basically every ability is probably going to change like across the board. So there are going to be some spreadsheets and data and stuff put together. Give that time. Now, don't get all up in arms about the fact that they're, making your abilities cool down a little bit longer, because honestly, this next section is where it's going to balance itself out. I think. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think the abilities that they're giving us here to balance these equations, what you want to lean into, is almost potentially for greater, which is probably why they had to make the cooldowns a little bit longer, because I think you're going to be able to counter them in other ways. Basically, starting in Lightfall, you'll be able to run all of the following ability-generating mods at the same time, and more freely be able to socket multiple copies of each. So if you're going into a grenade build, grenade kickstart on your class item, bomber, you've got, you know, ashes to assets, all of those things can literally be used all at the same time. You don't have to be running a solar piece of armor or an arc piece of armor to be able to slot in grenade kickstart or melee kickstart. Maybe you want to put both of them on your class item. And guess what? You're probably going to be able to. Why? Because you no longer have to put artifact mods into your armor. They are going to be unlocked as a passive buff to your character that is just active all the time. And the artifact mods are no longer going to take space on your armor. On top of that, armor mod energy costs have been reduced across the board. Probably all except like the resilience mod, I think, is the only one going up because it does give damage mitigation, which is a good thing. Most armor mods have been reduced in cost. So gives access to probably more people to get more mods, probably be able to run double stuff here and there. But a lot of these things, you know, if you do melee damage, you get your energy back. If you do grenade damage, you get your grenade energy back. If you do your class ability, then you get your grenade back. If you do grenade damage, then you build up your super. Like if you go heavy in a grenade build and then you all of a sudden pull out a demolitionist like primary weapon for killing or something, you're going to be able to get your grenades up no problem. Like that's not going to be an issue if you lean into that build. So I still think we're going to be able to be very powerful, and we have to mess with the loadouts to see if we're even more broken than we expect, because they even state they probably expect players will find unique combination of mods and perks we didn't anticipate, so there's going to be some fun stuff that works together. And again, they'll tune and stuff as they go, but the idea is you don't have to waste mod slots on artifact mods. You don't have to waste like your armor energy on artifact mods, because you're going to literally be able to have that just unlock passive. Now, part of me worries a little bit that the artifact changes, being as they're going to be permanent unlocks, like the final column where usually everybody's fun mods to get are. I worry a little bit that those final ones are not going to be as strong because they're going to be passive all the time. Now, I'm hoping you can still pick 2 in the final column, because depending on the balance of like energy cost and things like that, you could usually put 1 or 2 of those mods on your character. But the nice thing is, like this season, I've been running solo operative and weekend clear on my class item. I have had 0 benefit from my class item for mods or stats or anything all season. I literally don't have to worry about that now, so it just gives you more flexibility, and that's just something I'm looking forward to. So honestly, when it comes to the whole loadout system, I still wonder how things are all going to work out. But the fact that, you know, your tier 10 stat is now only going to give you the benefit of tier 8, I think is easily going to be probably counteracted if you start running multiple copies of some of these mods, and you get the flexibility to do that because your arms aren't taken up by champion mods, your class items not taken up by artifact benefit mods, which are cool. You can just get the chances at both. So overall, I'm not too worried about it, so I wouldn't be up in arms about regeneration rate changing. I like the linear scaling, actually. But I think what we're going to be able to do for stacking mods, if you want to lean into a certain build, I think you're definitely still going to be able to, and possibly even more so. They also mentioned for marks for the dodge for the hunters, they're reverting the changes that they just recently made. So I don't know if 2 teams didn't talk to each other or something happened, but the cooldown for the dodges is going back down where it was before, I swear, our last hotfix that we had. And I think the main reason they're doing that is because of whatever change they're making to general stats is probably the system they want to use. Main other thing that they want to talk about here is supers. Roaming supers don't get a lot of love right now, and they're kind of weak. They really are. If you think about what you can do with a Volt Shot Ikelos weapon to clear ads in a room, you don't need to cast a super to clear ads in a room. You've got a gun that can do that. You don't need an ability. You definitely don't need to use super energy to clear ads. Most of the time, you can do that with your weapons pretty powerfully. So, they don't say that everything... so as our first step, and again, we don't have a full suite of changes ready just yet to make roaming supers where they want them. But right now, they are making roaming supers give you more orbs. So if you do clear a room, you'll get 7 orbs instead of 5. And then one-off supers are actually going to give you less orbs. But the orb generation of Well, Ward of Dawn, and Shadow Shot, that's going to be the same. And they also took the slowest supers, I think it was tier 1, if you're going to go for slowest, however they named them. The cooldown is going to go up a tier. So now instead of like the slowest, they're the second slowest super. And there's just more in that category. And again, if you're somebody who wants to run something like Fist of Havoc or Daybreak, it just doesn't do as much benefit. You usually don't have great DPS on a boss. and it's hard to do DPS with some of those. And also for ad clear, you never feel like you want to spend your super on clearing ads because you're like, I can just do that with weapons and bullets and save my super energy for something big or a boss when I need it. They're trying to find a way to balance that. They haven't got the full suite of changes ready just yet. But again, I mean, there are certain supers that most people will not use, and they're working on changing that, especially for like Titans have more roaming supers than anyone, and they all kind of feel about the same. So at some point, hopefully those feel a little different or stronger. Next thing they mentioned is Ward of Dawn. Basically in PvP, this thing's busted. It just is. So what they're doing is in PvE, it shouldn't feel much of a change because they're reducing the health of the bubble, but the damage combatants do to the bubble is going to be reduced, so you shouldn't feel much of a difference. The damage done by weapon types, whether it's kinetic or energy, used to be different. Energy did 2.5 times, kinetic did the same. Now all weapons do 1.5 times damage to the ward. I don't know if that's a massive difference, but either way, the biggest thing they're trying to do is make it easier for the person standing in the bubble, like to be able to be punched out of it or killed inside it. So the max health reduced inside the bubbles from 425 to 300. But to counter the PvE change, they said now inherits the void overshield's 50% PvE damage resistance. So if you're in your bubble, the damage coming into you is actually going to be halved. And if you look at this, it's not half. So in theory, you still actually should be a smidge stronger in your bubble in PvE. Also, it no longer negates precision damage. So the Armor of Light means precision damage. So if somebody peeks out and you snipe them, theoretically should still be able to pop them in the head and kill them. So that's mostly for PvP because they mentioned, you know, Crucible, Zone Control, Iron Banner Fortress, Zone Capture Trials. All of those are just painful with bubbles. They really are just a whole bunch of bubbles popping all the time. So they're trying to basically find ways to counter that, which I'm mostly fine with as long as they don't kill it in PvE. I'm okay. And I think most people, if you don't want to see 1,000 bubbles in PvP, probably also a good thing. Thunder Crash on the other side, apparently they think it's too powerful in Crucible, which kind of hurts me as mostly a PvE player, but sometimes Crucible. Basically, they're reducing the flight time by half a second. Not a drastic deal, but still just don't love it. Reduce the size of the damage volume around the player and also pushed it forward in front of the player. So if you're going to do a flyby disintegration, you really have to basically fly through them, not near them. The descent, like your downward pathing, begins earlier. The landing detonation size versus players is 20%, so hopefully less people will be caught in it if you're close, but not quite. But they are unchanged versus PvE targets. So again, the unchanged versus PvE targets is here, but it doesn't mean the descent, the flight time, and the other stuff is going to be much better. Now, are you still going to be able to, you know, fly across the room and smash a boss? Probably. Will you be able to cheat your way out of a situation and fly upwards? Probably less of that, though. The other thing they said is Fist of Havoc, our other super, increased PvE damage by 20%. I don't know if that's enough to make me want to use Fist of Havoc for any type of DPS, but maybe it's better to kill champions or mid-level targets as opposed to feeling like I'm not doing anything against them, so we'll see. Again, roaming supers need some love. This is a step in the right direction, but we're getting there. Spark of Resistance they feel is a bit strong for Arc 3.0. Basically, it's the one where you get damage resistance when you're surrounded. Increase the number of nearby combatants required for activation from 2 to 3. Reduce lingering time after you are no longer surrounded from 4 seconds to 2 seconds. So it won't hang on as long, and it takes another combatant for it to be in effect. Solar 3.0, this is probably good for Warlocks. Daybreak, the super energy cost is reduced from 10.5 to 6.5. So each swing costs 3.5% less of your super to use, and your PvE damage is 25% more. So in theory, I mean, if it was 10% and you got like 10 swings, now 6.5, you're going to get more swings and each one hits harder. So a double win for Daybreak. Again, still not sure it's going to be the god tier super for PvE, but, you know, hopefully more options to use it and have a little fun. Phoenix Dive also getting a nice buff across the board. The cooldown is reduced by by close to 30 seconds. When Heat Rises is active, Phoenix's Dive restoration duration is increased from 1 to 3 seconds. When Daybreak is active, Phoenix Dive's cooldown is significantly reduced, allowing for rapid reactivations, and when Daybreak is active, Phoenix Dive's detonation, maximum damage is increased from 80 to 220, and that will basically kill a Guardian. So, technically, if you can Phoenix Dive on somebody while Daybreak is active and they're below you, you'll kill them, most likely. Crash Test Guardians, they do say the physics collision damage will no longer be lethal to Guardians. Fall damage will still be lethal when Lightfall launches, but we plan to make that non-lethal in mid-season update as well. You'll still take damage from physics collisions, but it will generally leave you at 1 HP instead of killing you. So most of the time, if you get booped, blasted, splattered against a wall, you'll be weak, but you won't be dead. Now, you may get blasted and then, you know, still, of course, shot by the next bullet, but at least the boop won't kill you in and of itself. And then fall damage, hopefully not being lethal as well. No accidental falls, especially for us titans like myself, where we trip and forget to hit our jump soon enough. So hopefully no deaths that way, which is a good thing, especially if you're going for like a solo flawless run and you've got to drop down in a section somewhere. That's what's not going to kill you. If you hit a fan, they'll still kill you. Just ask me. But hopefully falls won't. New tools in the arsenal. So they're going to be adding some fragments to light subclasses and updating a handful of fragments on solar and void. So for Arc, we've got 2 new ones. Spark of Instinct. When critically wounded, taking damage from nearby enemies emits a burst of arc damage or arc energy that jolts targets, which is cool. So if you're surrounded and you got enemies killing you and you're almost going to die, technically you're going to actually send some damage out and probably send them a little bit of a hiccup. Spark of Haste. You have greatly increased resilience, recovery, and mobility while sprinting. So if you are just running in the world of go fast arc mode, now you're a little more resilient. Solar, we've got fire sprites, and then void, we've got void breaches. And since wells are going away, like solar, arc, void, wells are going away, they are replacing those with different things. So we've already got ionic traces for arc. Stasis, we've got stasis shards. I'm guessing strain is going to have tangles or its own little thing, whatever they are. Solar, we've got fire sprites. Void, we've got void breaches. And you've got different ways to, and they grant you grenade energy on pickup for the fire sprites, and then void grants class ability energy on pickup as well. So you'll be able to pick those up and just get the energy just by picking them up. So picture that. And then they've got 2 new ones for solar. When you revive an ally, you and other nearby allies gain restoration. When you pick up a fire sprite, you also gain restoration, which is your healing. Ember of Resolve, solar grenade final blows cure you, so you just get a straight up heal. Ember of Tempering now creates a fire sprite on solar weapon kills while active, in addition to its original effects, and these are all like while their normal effects are on. Ember of Combustion now creates a fire sprite on solar defeats, and then Ember of Searing now creates a fire sprite when defeating scorched target. So if you take the Ember of Tempering, for example, I'm going to switch over to the other screen and look at it here real quick. Ember of Tempering, solar weapon final blows grant you and your allies increased recovery for a short duration, stacks 3 times. So if you get a solar weapon final blow, you have increased recovery for a short duration. You can stack it up. Also, it helps you with airborne effectiveness, but that I'm not so worried about. But what it does now, it will create a fire sprite when you get a solar weapon kill. And then if you pick up the fire sprite, you're also going to get grenade energy. Not too shabby. So again, when you guys were worried about ability uptimes, depending on which subclass you run, which mods you run, which weapon perks you have, I don't think your abilities are really going to be hurting too much unless you were just looking for like constant uptime, and that's probably what they're trying to steer us slightly away from. Void breaches. So again, those give you class ability energy. Echo of Cessation. I could have said that wrong, who knows. Finisher final blows create a burst of void energy that causes nearby enemies to become volatile. So finishers literally can make things volatile, which is kind of cool. Defeating a volatile target creates a void breach. Defeating a target when your shields are depleted grants you a temporarily void overshield. Now that's one of those like, I'm doing something solo and I'm on a void subclass and I need to survive in a pinch. Technically, if your shields are depleted, you're in your health only. And then if you kill something, getting a temporary overshield to survive that crappy moment could be huge. So that's actually nice for like solo survivability, that kind of thing. Echo of Domineering now creates a void breach when defeating suppressed targets. Echo of Harvest now creates a void breach when defeating weakened targets with precision damage. And Echo of Starvation now grants Devour when picking up a void breach. So if you got Domineering, if you switch over to that one, again, I'm just switching over to game here. Domineering, after suppressing a target, you gain greatly increased mobility for a short duration, and your equipped weapon is reloaded from reserves. So if you suppress a target, weapon reloaded, extra mobility, and on top of that, now if you defeat a void target, you're going to create a void breach when you defeat the suppressed target. So if you suppress them, your weapon's reloaded. Then if you defeat them, you make a void breach. Kind of a nice little cycle there. And then Echo of Starvation, picking up an orb of power grants Devour. Cool. Well, then if you're here, now grants Devour on picking up a void breach. So whether it's a void breach or an orb of power, getting Devour is something you're probably going to be able to do. So making void breaches and orbs, combination of both, could be a good thing. So that's the general idea of what we've got here. abilities are changing. This is not an all-encompassing list of everything. And they've also mentioned, like, you know, we've got different ways to tackle champions, whether it's, you know, Solar Radiant for Barrier or Blinding for Overload, that kind of thing. They talk about it all in the build crafting for loadouts. So if you haven't read that article, please go do. But all that stuff is changing. And I think generally most of the stuff seems pretty reasonable. The things that are coming down, I get it. They don't want us to have infinite stuff. But on the other side, we've also got a lot of ways to counter kind of the lower cooldowns. So I think in general, a lot of this is just going to be mostly pretty neutral. And depending on what you build into, possibly we could actually end up better. The one other thing I did want to show you guys real quick, so is the strand stuff. So for Berserker, Titan, you've got Blade Fury. That's the big arm blades that we've seen. The light attack is faster and faster and faster. So your first like 3 get quicker, and then you'll be slashing, which are going to build up at that point as like kind of both hands coming across like Wolverine, making kind of an X, and it's going to throw 2 lashes that seat targets. Frenzied Blade is a triple melee slash, and all the melees are basically triple with strand. Enter the Fray. Basically enhance your armor with Woven Mail and increase your melee regeneration. Woven Mail is a damage mitigation thing, so we'll actually be able to survive a little bit more. Dragon's Lash is, if you saw the exotic trailer, if you put up a barricade, sends a lash out in front, and the enemies in front of that get suspended. So putting up your barricade is just basically cool in Strand. For Warlocks, you've got Needle Storm, so you make a cloud above you, you send out the piercing missiles that detonate, turn into threadlings, crawl across the ground, and kill other stuff. So you've got like a 2-phase damage potential. Arcane Needle, you've got a triple needle that will track the targets, and you've got 3 of them charged if thrown quickly. Weaver's Call, when you cast a rift, you're going to make threadlings, and then if you have any perchings, which like if you have threadlings that you create and they don't have a target, they just come back to you as a warlock and hang out. And you're going to have a total of 5, theoretically. If you cast a rift, you'll make 3 plus the 5 perchlings. Theoretically, if you cast a rift, you can have 8 threadlings just go roam for enemies. So definitely the threadling master, the Broodweaver is, and you've also got empowerments with your grenades. And then the Thread Runner, you've got Silk String, so that's your rope dart, and then also the 360 spin, also versus single targets. I'm very curious to see how that one does. I've got to imagine the 360 spin in a PvP setting got some potential there. The Threaded Spike is the rope dart that you throw out, ricochets, and then it returns. But if you do like a, like a perfect reload in other games, if you do a perfect catch on the melee, you'll get even extra melee energy than normal. You've got an Ensnaring Slam, so if you slam from above, you're just basically going to do a ballistic slam like a Titan has, but now you're going to suspend all those enemies in the air and just be able to turn around and kill them all. Widow's Silk, so you'll be able to grapple more often, so you get like double grapples, or double grenade energy, because your grapple technically is your grenade slot. And you'll be able to create grapple points that you and your fire team can use indefinitely, and if you hit one of those like permanent points, it also like recharges your grapple, so you've got another one. So Hunters are going to be the grappling masters of all of them. Shared abilities, as I said, grapple takes up your grenade, but you also have a grapple melee. So if you grapple towards an enemy and melee, you'll get a strand empowered punch. And that unravels them. That's one of the verbs of strand. Grenades, tightly woven threads of utility and destruction imbued with functionality from the weave. So you can throw out a grenade that will like do an area of suspension, so they're just kind of like held in air by the threads. You've also got another grenade that just makes threadlings and they seek out enemies and go after them. And then, as I said, Warlocks also can like absorb the grenades to get different effects. Like the Warlock can absorb one of the grenades, and now their bullets, if they get a kill, causes like the little suspension around them. So overall, Strand seems cool, and I think what they're doing to our abilities here is kind of a nice balance. I understand that they feel we are overpowered. I get it. So if you're not happy with that, I totally understand. But I think what they're doing with all of the mods that we're going to be able to, mods are cheaper. I don't have to worry about artifact mods on the armor. The combination of all of this, I think, will counter these like small like passive reductions. And honestly, I think we're going to be able to be just fine when it comes to the abilities that we get back. So that's everything we got today. That is the kind of Abilities and Beyond 3.0 refresh update that we've got going into Lightfall. If you guys enjoyed this one, if you learned something in here, drop a like below. Anything you're excited to worry about, throw those in the comments. Curious where you guys are at. Join us for the podcast tomorrow, 7 p.m. Pacific time, right here on this channel. And if you guys enjoyed this one, you can find me over on Twitch or Twitter at Ebontis right here. Always got more videos coming, so hit that subscribe button, hit the alert bell, and I will see you guys very soon. Have a good one, and good afternoon.